Her smile, her name, it was known around the world. Yet what we know of Farrah Fawcett was only a fraction of who she was.
I'm constantly surprised when people give me titles like that.
Farrah Fawcett's name brings an immediate image to mind. That million-dollar smile, the sun-kissed hair, and the effortless sweetness that made her one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Yet behind the poster, behind the gloss of Charlie's Angels, behind the massive fame she never fully asked for, stood a woman far more intricate, vulnerable, and misunderstood than the world ever realized. Her legacy has surged again in 2025. Her artwork selling for unheard-of prices, social media reviving her iconic feathered hairstyle, and new generations rediscovering the quiet strength that lay beneath her seemingly uncomplicated beauty. What people think they know about Farrah has been shaped by decades of publicity, gossip, and a carefully crafted Hollywood persona. What they don't know is what shaped her life far more deeply. Her loneliness, her discipline, her fear of failure, and the quiet inner battles that followed her everywhere. Farrah Lenny Fawcett was born on February 2, 1947, in Corpus Christi, Texas, an ordinary beginning for a woman who would later become anything but ordinary. Her parents, Jim and Pauline, lived a modest, conservative life grounded in Catholic values, discipline, and hard work. The structure of her childhood home was strict but loving. Farrah was taught to be polite, graceful, and obedient, lessons that would influence how she navigated fame later on. As a child, she rarely felt like the center of attention. That role belonged to her older sister, Diane, who served as both a guide and a quiet competitor for Farrah's affection and admiration. What set Farrah apart from a young age wasn't beauty. It was the softness of her mannerisms, her deep introspection, and the artistic talent that emerged long before cameras ever pointed at her. She would sit at the kitchen table with pencils and clay, shaping faces with astonishing detail, winning small contests without ever letting the attention go to her head. Art gave Farrah something she would return to for the rest of her life, a sense of control and a voice she never quite found in Hollywood. During her teen years, Farrah grew rapidly into the striking woman people would later idolize. At W.B. Ray High School, she became known not just for her looks, but for her discipline. She didn't party, rebel, or chase attention. She organized her days meticulously, stuck to routines, and carried herself with a confidence that didn't come from ego, but from preparation. Teachers admired her maturity. Classmates found her poised and kind, though some mistook her quiet nature for aloofness. She would later say she felt invisible more than admired, a feeling that never quite disappeared, even during the height of her fame. In 1965, Farrah earned a beauty scholarship to the University of Texas at Austin, an honor she didn't expect, but accepted with her parents' cautious approval. She originally majored in microbiology, later switching to art, always torn between academic discipline and the creative calling that felt more natural to her. At UT, she joined a sorority, and for the first time, Farrah began getting attention for her appearance on a scale that made her uncomfortable. Her elegance stood out without her trying. She was named one of the 10 most beautiful co-eds, a title that would change the trajectory of her life. Hollywood publicist David Mirisch saw her picture and immediately sensed something rare: beauty that didn't intimidate, charisma that didn't rely on expression, a face the camera wouldn't ignore. He contacted her repeatedly, urging her to come to Los Angeles. Farrah resisted, convinced she wasn't built for acting. Her parents were reluctant too, but the opportunity grew too large to ignore. In 1967, at just 20 years old, Farrah packed her bags and stepped into a world she was unprepared for. Hollywood was far harsher than she expected. Early auditions were draining and humiliating, with casting directors staring more than speaking. She felt judged, not for her talent, but for the shape of her smile and the color of her hair. Living off meager savings, she worked as a shampoo girl in salons and took small modeling jobs to survive. Her confidence wavered constantly. She feared she made a mistake leaving Texas, where she felt grounded and understood. Her first major break came in 1969 with the now famous nude shoot for Esquire magazine. It wasn't something she initially wanted, but pressure from agents and the promise of exposure won out. The shoot generated controversy. Praise for her beauty on one hand, criticism for her innocence being exploited on the other. The attention gave her career momentum, but also burdened her with a public image she didn't choose. Her signature hairstyle, a soft, layered wave, began to take shape around this time. People were mesmerized by it. Farrah, however, still felt self-conscious, shy, and unsure of herself beneath the surface. Trying to find clarity, she accepted a modeling trip to Japan. It was a lonely, emotionally testing experience. In foreign streets and unfamiliar rooms, Farrah confronted the intense solitude that fame would later magnify. She realized how fragile she felt, how much she missed genuine human connection, and yet how determined she was to succeed. Returning to the U.S., Farrah signed with a major modeling agency in 1968, launching a whirlwind career in commercials, more than 100 by year's end. She became the wholesome American ideal, approachable, kind, the girl next door without even trying. Studios pushed her to do nude spreads and provocative shoots, especially as Playboy made repeated offers, but Farrah quietly refused. She set boundaries early, and though they cost her roles, they preserved her dignity. She desperately wanted to be seen as more than a pretty face. Meanwhile, her personal life shifted dramatically when she met Lee Majors, one of Hollywood's rising stars. Their relationship offered comfort and security in the beginning, but Majors' fame overshadowed hers, and his control over her life slowly intensified. Farrah adored him, but she was already beginning to lose pieces of herself. By 1976, Farrah Fawcett had become a familiar face in American households, though few knew her name. That changed overnight with a single poster, the famous red swimsuit image that would go on to become the best-selling poster of all time. Farrah styled her own hair, did her own makeup, and chose the suit herself. There was no team of image makers behind the photo, just genuine warmth and natural charisma. The poster captured something pure, something effortlessly inviting, and the public responded with overwhelming enthusiasm. For Farrah, it was surreal. She was used to being admired quietly, almost reluctantly. Now she was plastered on millions of walls around the world. That same year, she was cast as Jill Monroe on Charlie's Angels, a show that promised a blend of action, charm, and a trio of women solving crimes with style. Farrah had only a handful of lines in the pilot script, yet when the show aired, viewers couldn't take their eyes off her. The feathered hair, the dazzling smile, and the approachable confidence all blended into a character that became an instant cultural phenomenon. Ratings soared. Fan mail flooded in by the thousands. People lined up outside studios, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. But the reality behind the scenes was far from glamorous. The filming schedule was brutal, stretching late into the night. Farrah was paid significantly less than her co-stars, and even less than many male actors on other shows. She felt overworked, underpaid, and creatively constrained. Jill Munroe was becoming an icon, but Farrah felt trapped by her own image. She had always wanted to be taken seriously, and the role, despite its fame, left her unfulfilled. Her marriage to Lee Majors was strained by then. Majors worked long hours, and Farrah's sudden popularity made their schedules nearly opposite. When she returned home exhausted, he often wasn't there. When he came home, she was on set. Miscommunication and emotional distance grew quietly between them. Farrah tried to fix things, but Hollywood's pressures were relentless. After only one season of Charlie's Angels, she made a decision that shocked the industry. She walked away. The studio sued her. Producers threatened to blacklist her. She became the subject of public criticism, labeled ungrateful or foolish for leaving a hit show. But Farrah stood firm. She wanted creative freedom. She didn't want to spend her entire career playing one version of a woman. The lawsuit dragged on until a settlement was reached. Farrah would make 6 guest appearances over the following years. Meanwhile, the studio profited enormously from her image. Merchandise sales skyrocketed. Lunchboxes, dolls, posters. Yet Farrah received only a small fraction of the earnings. She later said she never fully understood how large corporations could take ownership of someone's likeness so completely. After leaving the show, Farrah sought film roles that would prove her dramatic range. Logan's Run in 1976 gave her visibility, but not the acting credibility she craved. Somebody Killed Her Husband in 1978 was met with lukewarm reception and box office disappointment. Critics were harsh, often focusing more on her looks than her performance. The pressure weighed heavily on her confidence. Around this time, her marriage to Lee Majors finally unraveled. The emotional distance was too deep, and the jealousy surrounding her career created fractures they couldn't repair. They separated and eventually divorced in 1982. Farrah was heartbroken, but she also felt liberated. It was the first time in years she could make decisions without someone overshadowing her choices. As the 1970s gave way to the 1980s, Farrah's career hit turbulence. Saturn III, released in 1980, became infamous for production issues and harsh reviews. Sunburn, released a year earlier, did little to improve her reputation. She received Razzie nominations, something that wounded her deeply. Farrah was sensitive, far more than she let people know, and criticism cut straight through her. Behind closed doors, she doubted herself. In public, she continued smiling. Despite setbacks, Farrah found a surprising success with The Cannonball Run in 1981. The film was a comedic hit, but its success was overshadowed by tragedy. A stuntwoman died during filming. Farrah struggled to reconcile the humor of the film with the loss that occurred on set. She never ignored the darkness behind the entertainment industry. By the early 1980s, Farrah felt trapped between her past as a glamorous icon and the future she wanted as a serious actress. She wasn't making the films she believed in. Offers dried up. Bills mounted. Yet she refused to settle. She was determined to turn her career around, not through scandal or publicity, but through real work. Her reinvention came unexpectedly with a role few expected her to embrace. In 1984, Farrah starred in The Burning Bed, a harrowing film about domestic abuse based on a true story. She threw herself into the role with raw vulnerability, cutting her hair short and shedding every trace of glamour. She met with domestic violence survivors, absorbing their stories. On set, she carried emotional weight so heavy that crew members found it difficult to look her in the eyes between takes. The film stunned critics and audiences. Farrah's performance was powerful, haunting, and deeply human. She earned an Emmy nomination, and for the first time, was recognized not for her beauty, but for her talent. This role mattered to her in a way no other had. It validated her. It proved she was more than a poster. More than an angel, her momentum continued with extremities, first on Broadway and then as a film in 1986. In this role, Farrah portrayed a woman who fights back against her attacker. The physical and emotional intensity was immense. During stage performances, she occasionally bruised herself. She refused to fake the struggle. The truth mattered to her. Critics praised her transformation. Audiences saw a woman who wasn't afraid to confront darkness. By the end of the 1980s, Farrah had become a symbol of resilience. She had wrestled control of her career back from a system that once tried to define her. She had been underestimated for years, and then proved almost everyone wrong. As the 1990s began, Farrah faced a new chapter, one filled with artistic exploration, professional risks, and deeply personal turmoil. With the success of her dramatic roles behind her, she felt pressure to maintain that momentum. Hollywood is unforgiving, especially toward women past 40, and Farrah knew it. Still, she continued searching for projects that challenged her. She starred in the television sitcom Good Sports alongside Ryan O'Neal. On paper, the pairing made sense, a real-life couple with undeniable chemistry. But their off-screen relationship, already strained by years of volatility, made the production difficult. Ryan's moods could be unpredictable, and Farrah, often walking on emotional eggshells, tried to keep the peace. Their improvisational approach brought authenticity to the show, but behind the lighthearted scenes were arguments, tears, and long periods of tension. The series was canceled after one season. The next year, Farrah starred in Ruby Cairo, an ambitious but ultimately flawed thriller. Critics called it confusing and uneven. Farrah felt the sting of disappointment once again. By the mid-90s, she sensed Hollywood was closing its doors to her. Roles grew fewer, scripts became less meaningful. The industry seemed eager to move on to younger faces. With fewer acting opportunities, Farrah turned inward, to art. The passion she'd carried since childhood. Sculpting became her refuge. She worked with clay for hours at a time, losing herself in the sensation of shaping something by hand. It grounded her. It made her feel real in a world that often treated her like an illusion. In 1997, she held a public exhibit of her sculptures. Critics were divided. Some took her work seriously, praising its emotional intensity, while others dismissed it as another celebrity vanity project. But the exhibit brought in large crowds, proof that Farrah's name still commanded attention. She didn't mind the mixed reviews. For the first time in years, she was creating something entirely for herself. Later that year, she accepted a role in Robert Duvall's film The Apostle. On set, Farrah was challenged in ways she hadn't expected. Duvall demanded raw authenticity, pushing her to shed all traces of vanity. At times, the environment was intense, but Farrah delivered a quiet, haunting performance. Critics praised her restraint, and her respect for Duvall deepened. She continued exploring new types of work, making a brief and surprising appearance on Ally McBeal in 1998. It reminded audiences of her charm and brought her back into the cultural spotlight. But Farrah's relationship with Hollywood remained complicated. She accepted roles here and there, TV movies, smaller films, but by the early 2000s, the industry's ageism was undeniable. Scripts sent to her were often shallow, disrespectful, or centered entirely on aging tropes. Farrah felt insulted, but she also understood the harsh reality. Hollywood wasn't built to value women past their youth, no matter how talented they were. By this time, her personal life had grown more chaotic than ever. Her relationship with Ryan O'Neal, which began back in 1979, had spanned decades of passion, volatility, and heartbreak. At their best, they were inseparable, sharing humor, tenderness, and a love that felt larger than life. At their worst, they were destructive, pulling each other into emotional storms neither knew how to escape. In 1985, they had welcomed their son, Redmond. Farrah adored him. She often said motherhood was the only role she entered with complete certainty. Yet parenting with Ryan came with constant challenges. Ryan struggled with addiction and temper issues. Their home would swing between peaceful and chaotic without warning. The breaking point came in 1997. On Valentine's Day, the day couples everywhere celebrated affection, Farrah walked into their home and discovered Ryan with another woman. The betrayal shattered her. After nearly 2 decades of loyalty, patience, and emotional endurance, she couldn't repair the damage. Farrah left him, and the relationship, though it would later rekindle in complicated ways, was never the same again. Her heartbreak seeped into her career decisions. The 1990s and early 2000s brought a series of projects both meaningful and forgettable. She worked on Hollywood Wives in 2003 and The Cookout in 2004, but her frustration with Hollywood's expectations only grew. Casting directors often couldn't see past her past. She was Farrah Fawcett, the icon, the hair, the poster, never fully the actress she fought so hard to become, period. In 2005, she agreed to appear in Chasing Farrah, a reality TV series documenting her life. Cameras followed her through daily routines, visits to her studio, and moments of quiet introspection. The show revealed how lonely fame could be. Farrah wasn't surrounded by parties or glamour. She spent much of her time creating art, visiting close friends, or reflecting on decisions she made decades earlier. Viewers saw a more vulnerable Farrah, one who still carried the weight of expectations she never asked for, period. But conflicts and struggles weren't limited to her romantic life. Behind the scenes, Farrah faced legal battles and profound betrayals. In 1997, she sued the producer of Small Sacrifices for withholding more than $1 million in earnings. She bravely pursued the case and won $1.5 million, a rare victory in a system that often exploited actors. That same year, she experienced one of the most painful events of her life. She entered a relationship with film director James Orr, who later assaulted her during a violent outburst. Farrah went to the police, testified, and stood firm despite public scrutiny. Orr was convicted. Farrah's courage sparked conversations about domestic violence and the treatment of women in the industry. Around this time, rumors swirled about Farrah's struggles with substance use. In a 1997 Playboy interview, she addressed the speculation openly, speaking candidly about her brief use of sleeping pills and her stay in rehab in 1982. She spoke not with defensiveness, but with honesty, uncommon for celebrities of that era. Yet through all the chaos, Farrah maintained a long, quiet, and private relationship with her former college sweetheart, Greg Lott. The relationship began in the late 1990s and lasted, secretively, until her final days. It was a refuge, something pure and untainted by Hollywood. Later, her will would confirm the depth of that connection. By the early 2000s, Farrah's life felt like a fragile balance between art, heartbreak, aging in a ruthless industry, and the pressures of being a mother to Redmond, who battled his own addictions and legal troubles. She worried about him constantly, often more than she worried about herself. And then, in 2006, everything changed with one diagnosis. Farrah Fawcett's life remains one of the most complex, misunderstood, and compelling stories in Hollywood history. To many, she was the poster, the hair, the smile, the icon that defined a generation. But the closer one looks, the more evident it becomes that she spent her entire life fighting to be seen as something deeper. An artist, a survivor, a mother, and a woman with extraordinary inner resilience. Her final years, marked by a grueling battle with cancer, revealed that resilience more clearly than any role she ever played. Farrah faced her illness with brutal honesty, refusing to hide behind Hollywood fantasy. Through her documentary, she allowed the world to see her pain, her fear, and her determination to survive. Not for fame, but for her son, for the people who loved her, and for the truth. In doing so, she transformed the way the public viewed both her and the disease she fought. The world mourned deeply when she passed on June 25, 2009. Yet the tragedy of her death was compounded by the chaos that followed. Media frenzy, conflicting narratives about her relationships, and the heartbreaking struggles of her son, Redmond, who continued to battle addiction while grieving the one person who had always believed in him. Even after her passing, Farrah was at the center of controversy. Questions about her will, her final wishes, the men who claimed her love, and the legacy she intended to leave behind. But beneath the noise, her true impact quietly grew. Her foundation continued its work, funding research, supporting patients, and carrying her mission forward. By 2025, interest in Farrah Fawcett had undergone a renaissance. Young people rediscovered her, not as a sex symbol, but as a woman of courage and vulnerability. Her artwork, once dismissed by critics, began selling for record-breaking prices. Fashion trends revived her iconic hairstyle, which once again filled social media feeds. Her story, once reduced to a handful of pop culture moments, became the subject of documentaries, memoirs, and deep cultural re-examination. Even at her gravesite, visitors placed flowers, letters, and photographs, acknowledging a woman who gave the world so much more than a poster. Farrah's legacy is not a simple one. It is layered with triumph and heartbreak, innocence and betrayal, fame and isolation. She was adored by millions, yet lonely at times. She was underestimated repeatedly, yet kept proving herself with unshakable determination. She cherished love even when it hurt her. She created art even when the world tried to define her only as an image. And in the end, she faced death with a level of bravery that redefined her once more, not as an angel or a beauty icon, but as a human being who refused to let her spirit fade quietly. Today, Farrah Fawcett is remembered not merely for how she looked, but for how she lived, with sincerity, strength, and a heart that stayed tender despite everything. Her story endures, reminding us that even the brightest icons are, at their core, deeply human.